and then go to that or whichever's, that starts, right? That starts at 6? Okay, I'll be there first and at 6:30 I'll come over here, get this one started and then go back over there. This one usually takes about a half hour unless we have a lot to report out. Okay? Okay, let me know when I'm ready to begin. Okay, good evening. Welcome to the City of Groton Special Committee of the Whole for Monday, March 13th, 2023. Clerk Jacome, please call the roll.
Thank you. President, we have Mayor Hedrick, Deputy Mayor Depot, Councilor Carter, Councilor McCabe, Councilor Norris, Councilor Piazza, Councilor Sheffield, and City Clerk Edward Jacome.
Okay, thank you. All right, the new business is ARPA review. So we're using our meetings, our special cows for some ARPA. So Mary, you're up first.
All right, good evening, Mayor and Council. Do they all have this?
Yes.
So Parks and Recreation's in the green. These are, worked with the committee that the mayor has in place here in the city to narrow down. We had 10 projects initially for ARPA funds, and we've narrowed it down to these 6. And they're in order by priority based on what the department feels some of the funding should be used for. So our first one would be replacement of our tennis courts. Our tennis courts, I don't have the history of when they were installed, but I do know they were refurbished in 1997. And then we just did some additional work on them in 2016. They're starting to crack, and I don't know if it's shifting or if it's just they're old. They're starting to crack where it's becoming hazardous for people to use them. We also want to incorporate putting pickleball courts on them too, so that's such an up-and-coming sport that everybody seems to be playing these days and want information on. So we went out, got a quote back in September 2021, and have recently got a more recent quote this past February to get those all refurbished to pay, and they'd be a different type of, they'd be the post-tension concrete as opposed to what it is right now, which is asphalt. It would be all built, leveled, whatnot, then painted. And tennis courts, I learned in 2016, tennis courts are all painted by hand. All the lines that they do is all done by hand. So that would, there's tedious work there. There's some damage to the backside, I'm going to say the Baker Avenue side of our current tennis courts fencing, and it's because we have arborvitae growing up there that have taken over, so we'd look at trimming those back and then refencing. So that's the first project that we have. Mayor, do you want me to go through all of them or one by one and then questions?
Do you want to go through them all and then open up for questions, or do you want to open up for questions for each one? Okay, let's go ahead and go through all
Okay.
of them, and then we'll open up for questions for council.
Okay. So the next item I have is the Zaberski House. We did do some repairs to this building back 14, 15, and 16, when we redid all the wood railings and we painted it. And unfortunately, due to the nature of where it sits, it's time to do it again. But I would like to work with the Eastern Point Historic District to see if we can put in the composite type of railings. They have allowed that in the district for homes and whatnot, so that if we were able to do it that way, then at least it would maintain its, it would last, and we'd get it painted again. So we've put that in. This project I look at is, the Zaberski House is an asset that we do have in the city that we do generate revenue from. And it is, if any has been down to the beach lately, it is starting to look like it's in disrepair again, like it did in 12, 13, before we started doing work prior. The basketball court at Washington Park, we did a Band-Aid surfacing on that this past spring and summer. We filled the cracks with a product that the director of Public Works researched for me and found, and then we sealed it and then we got it painted. But it's just a temporary fix. It's very cracked also, just like the tennis courts. So we got a quote to do that. They are highly used, they are lit, and it's a very visible court. Up at Washington Park, up by the tennis courts, we had, in 2009, we put outside exercise equipment in. Some of it has deteriorated over the time, it's been in there since '09. We've lost a few pieces. We'd like to replace some of the pieces and add additional pieces. This equipment was used very, pretty much daily, weekly, during COVID, because it was a means for people to work outside and get exercise. A lot of it is all weight-based, like you said, and it's based on your own body weight and/or tensions. The swing sets at Washington Park and Eastern Point Beach, we have one swing set that really isn't to code anymore. It's awfully high, and and if we wanted to put the necessary safety fabric underneath it, it would take up quite a bit of distance. So we'd like, and the ones down at the beach, we have a 3-seater, which is again not to code in regards to safety. And then the last one is one that was brought to our attention through a counselor plus economic development, and that's trying to get internet at the beach and at Washington Park. So that way people could have, hook into Wi-Fi or have a password or do something so they could do stuff at Washington Park or the beach.
You done?
Correct.
Okay, Councilor McCabe?
Hi, thank you. These are really great projects. A couple of questions. First of all, I was surprised to see the internet like at the bottom of the list. It seems to me like that would be something higher. Why? How did you come up with these rankings?
Well, the internet wasn't something I put on there.
Right. It was added. Okay.
So I added it because it was a recommendation from a member of the council.
Okay.
It was talked about. We do have, we're working on internet access at the beach currently for the gatehouse. And we also have a point-to-point system there for our cameras. So I'm not sure if there's ways that we can integrate with those. I'm working with Little League. A couple years ago, Little League actually had internet at Washington Park because they used to live stream baseball games for parents parents who were out to sea or not home because of their involvement with the Navy.
Right.
So I'm not sure. We may actually have part of that there already, and it's just a matter of upgrading it so people can use it. But I'm thinking things that are. I was looking at things that. Would enhance, repairs, things
Right.
that if I get them in here, then I don't have to put them in my capital plan, which now wouldn't affect the taxpayer as much. Because some of the stuff, the Zabursky House would have to be done,
Right.
so.
I know there's a certain kind of paint that is actually like a coating that goes on the outside that would be, I wish I knew the brand. It's more than just an exterior paint. It actually seals it, and you never have to paint again. And I know people that use it in New London in the water areas. Is the external paint that you were looking at here just a regular external paint?
No, we had worked with, so the company that did the work on the Tyler House, we had Dave from Gasco look at, and his observation with the current paint wasn't actually a stucco paint, which that building is. If you go up to it, it's rough. So he's made a recommendation of what type of paint. I don't have that in front of me, so I can't answer that question, but we definitely want to make sure it's the right type of paint that's going to
Right.
stay on the building.
Okay,
Yes.
all right, that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor Depot?
Thank you, Mayor. I think that Parks and Rec projects, using ARPA funds for Parks and Rec projects is important. I know that a lot of our parks and the beach were used a lot during COVID, and they still are. I see a lot of people posting about like hiking at all the trails that are available and all that stuff. I was going to ask you, actually, is the Z House the only thing on this list that would have to be done and you would have to fit in your budget if we didn't approve it? Like, would everything else just be not done because it's not in your budget?
Well, it would eventually come up somewhere in the capital plan over the next 4 to 5 years, yes.
Okay. And then, question about the tennis courts. So the other thing I noticed about the tennis courts is those arborvitaes, are we going to, if we get new courts, put a maintenance plan in place? Because one of the things that I notice is that arborvitaes that block the sun create like, I don't know if it's fungus or what it is on the court, but it's slippery as heck. And so that was one of my concerns before, if we redo the courts, to make sure that that doesn't continue to happen, because it's gonna damage the new courts. So how are we going to manage that for the future?
So our goal is, we would probably cut the arborvitae down and put another type of barrier, fence barrier. I believe those plants were planted so there'd be a, lack of a better word, a sound barrier between the neighbors that sit back there in the tennis courts. So we would look at a different type of barrier that wouldn't be detrimental to the courts.
Okay, so you're looking at maybe putting a plant that doesn't grow so tall.
Correct. Or a fence. We
Or-
figure it out what would be the best, because there is a trail back
It
there too.
is really close to that house. It's pretty close
Yeah,
to a
and
house
there's,
back
so
there.
there's the stone wall barricade of the backyards, then there's an actual trail back there, and then there's the shrubs, and then there's the tennis courts. So our goal, yes, there is something causing moisture to get on the courts, and then it's not drying because the sun's not getting to that part because it's very shaded by the trees that have gotten very large.
And then, I think it's a great idea to add pickleball, especially since we're doing, if it's gonna be a huge project. Pickleball is very popular and it's getting more and more popular, so I really like that idea. My other question, I guess, is more for the mayor. What is I know that we're looking at all of these projects. Do we have a timeline for when we're going to initiate these projects? Because as we can, if you look at the old sheet that we had for the old estimate for the tennis courts, it's gone up quite a bit. So the longer we wait to start these projects, the more it's gonna cost. So I'm concerned that, of the timeline of this.
Understand. So, we have to have the projects identified and the money allocated by the end of '24, and it has to be spent by the end of '26. The reason I wanted to start doing this as special cows is to go through the projects, and we're gonna have to whittle them down. If you've noticed, at the bottom, we're down to 3.85 million. We have 2.6 million to spend. So we're gonna whittle these down, and then you're gonna be whittling them down again. And then once we get down to the amount that we can spend, then I'm gonna come to the council with resolutions to start allocating money and spending money on projects. I don't know I think it answers your question, but it doesn't give you a specific
Well,
time, because I don't have a specific timeline.
so I know the deadline is the end of 2024 to allocate them. Is that what our plan is, or are we looking to get it done like in 6 months?
I'm
or less?
looking to get it, I want to be done with this definitely by the end of the year, but I'd like to get it done sooner. If we can get it done in 6 months, that would be great. That way, I can talk to the council, but also bring it back to the internal ARPA committee so that we can maybe rank them or cut them down a little more, and then bring them back to you guys for final approval. Because what I think I heard from the council was that you didn't want to bring a bunch of projects, you wanted to just let us bring them to you, whittle them down, come to you guys, and then we'll have, you guys will then pick, and then we'll have a group of projects that we're going to execute.
Okay.
Is that close, or am I off?
Yes, no.
Okay.
That's helpful. I also just want to add that all of these projects on here are things that I've heard feedback from community members about. So I know that getting these Parks and Rec things done, including the swings, I've heard a lot of people talk about this, that the swings need to be replaced. So I know that, like, to me, the Parks and Rec projects are kind of high on my list, because I think they are kind of one of the things that every day affects the residents that they notice and that
Right.
they care about, so, that's all, thank
Okay,
you.
good, thanks. Counselor Carter?
I was just thinking, and especially to follow up on Lisa's, or what she said about the internet. No, not the internet. Maybe it was the internet.
Yeah.
The internet. So my question is it fair to put the internet in with Parks and Rec when it may be just an infrastructure problem on like the city as a whole? Meaning, like, I was told that, some of even the police radios have an issue or have problem, like, with the signals down closer to, like, the beach, et cetera, you know? I know cell phones and whatnot. So, is that like, would it be fair to allocate those funds from the Parks and Rec potential funds when there's other projects, that they have, as opposed to just making that a city thing? As far as, that's a communication thing.
Well, it's communications, but, so let's address the police. So the police are going to the state radio system, so hopefully the dead spots have been taken care of or will be taken care of. In addition, the fire department's gonna go to, state radio system, and the Groton utilities have gone to state radio system. So hopefully, we will have resolved the communication issues there. So when you talk about Wi-Fi, that's one of the things that was identified in the interim ruling and the final ruling. We talked about how can we get Wi-Fi into city areas. So we said, okay, what areas are those? One of those is the municipal building, and then the others are the parks. And that's why we have it included under parks, is because of Washington Park and also down at the beach. That's the only reason we put it under there.
No, I understand it. I'm just asking, is that fair? Because I just thought it was the ranking system, and Councilor McCabe had said, how come that's not first? But I'm looking at it as more of that's a city thing, function, because it's throughout, as
Yep.
opposed to, you know, she has other Parks and Rec has other projects
Sure.
that they actually have to do. So if we tackle something that could potentially be a city function, and that take away from the things that they actually need to get done, that she's had on. I'm just questioning, is that fair to put that to something that's in her budget? That, I'm just, you know.
It just, well, it's not necessarily in our budget, it's just, I have to put it somewhere.
No, I understand that.
So whether it's here, because this is,
But, okay, I got you. So is it, so my question would be, if you did put it inside what is in Parks and Rec, is that gonna take away from other things that, would that potentially take away from other things that Parks and Rec is in that list? Or do we just pick from everybody's list? That's my question.
well, and while we've already done that. Internally, we've evaluated and we've taken some things off that were on here, and we are going to continue to do that. The council, I don't know that it matters whether it's under Mary's list or my list or Bill's list or anybody else's list. It's something is, do you want it done? Because later on, you guys are going to have to make a choice. Because let me tell you something, we're at $3.85 million, and we only got $2.6 million. You can't get there from here.
No.
So you guys, the council, is going to have to make a decision. And I don't know that it matters.
And that's
If
the
it's-
reason why I'm asking, because I think if we don't know that, you know what I mean? I think if it's our belief that we're, okay, you have a pecking order, and the only reason I'm saying this, because you mentioned what she said, if you have a pecking order, are we supposed to choose things that is coming from, so say there's three things that Parks and Rec needed. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yep.
Like, we could shut something down just because there's three things that we think something's needed. Do you see what I'm saying?
I do.
So I'm just want to be clear on what we're voting on, and I think you just said that. I think you just gave me the answer, but
Initially, when we provided you information, provided the council information, I asked my department heads to prioritize them, 1, 2, 3. And you guys got that information on the priorities, was the number 1 priority, number 2 priority, number 3 priority. And then, once we started going through our list, I asked the department heads to say, and I went to the department heads and said, okay, look how much we have, look how much you want. I'm asking you guys to give me your top stuff. For example, these are Mary's top 6 projects. And then Bill's got 4 top projects, but he may have other projects. You know, the captain may have other projects, but these were their top projects. And I didn't say you're limited to 3 or you're limited to this dollar amount. We were trying to look at projects overall for the value for the city of Groton.
I understand that, and I think you understand what I'm saying, but what I'm trying to say better. So would highway, well, it's not highway anymore, it's Public Works. Would Public Works top floor automatically be just as high as Parks and Recs type floor? Like that's what I'm saying. Or are we just kind of lumping it together and kind of decided collectively what's more important? Or what we think is needed. Does that make sense?
Well,
do you guys know what I'm saying? Or no?
Yeah,
So-
we're lumping them together
Yeah.
and
You
deciding.
see what I'm saying?
Ultimately, it's up to us.
Well, that's the point. So, well, hold on.
But I don't think you can subjectively come up with,
If you want me or want my internal committee to come up, here's the top 15 things and here's when you run out of money, I'll do that. But I don't think that's what the council wants.
That's not what I'm asking.
So, but I'm not gonna, so Bill's number one thing,
Yeah.
well, but Bill's number one thing might not be the city's number one thing. Mary's number one thing
That's
might
what,
not be the city's number one thing.
that was my question. That's what I was saying, and that's why I started with my general statement was, is it? But what you're saying, it doesn't matter because it's the general city's needs.
It is.
Exactly. That's what
And
what I was saying.
then you guys, as the council, with your understanding of ARPA and what ARPA is supposed to be for, will have the decision to make what are you going to include and what are you not going to include. Even when we whittle this down, it's going to be more than $2.6 million. And you guys are going to have to, if you can't make the decision, then I'll go back internally and say, okay, here's what we're going to recommend, and then we'll come to you. But what I wanted to do was bring it to you. I would rather bring it to you, let you see what we have on our plate, and then you guys can say, I realize that's only $25,000, but that's important to me or important to the community, as opposed to something that may be $400,000. That might be important to me, but it may not be important to you or to the community. Right?
I understand what you're saying.
Okay.
I just didn't know if it was gonna be like, okay, this is your thing. You're gonna get two things that you need. You're gonna get two things that you need. You're gonna get two things that you need. I didn't know if it was gonna be like that, or are we just doing it in a whole?
Well, if you can look at this, Mary's got 6 things listed here, and somebody else has got 2, and somebody else has got 1. So I'm looking at what overall.
That's all I needed. I
Okay.
should have asked at the beginning with.
All right. Counselor Piazza? Well, you've spoken, you haven't yet, right? Have you spoken?
No,
Okay,
Okay.
then please, first-time speakers.
Oh, sorry.
you're right.
Thank you. Thank you. Great projects, Mary. I like. Thank you. So my question, when you're talking about the painting, how often are you painting the Zabierski house? How often is that happening?
So it was done in '04, and it was done in, it was a project that started in '14 and finished in '16. And that's as far back as I go. I'm not sure before 2004 when it was painted prior to that, but
Okay.
That's,
And so when you're talking about the railings and the exterior, are you talking like tech deck kind of material? Is that what you're talking about?
well, there's a composite material that's railings.
Yeah.
We have actually some at the Tyler House. The Tyler House columns have a composite base and cap, so they don't deteriorate as quickly. So we would look at, see if the Eastern Point Historic District could allow us to do that type of railings around, the lower porch, the upper porch, areas that are starting to rot again, and we just had them redone.
So the question we're gonna have the Eastern Point Historic District is, if it looks, period, is that okay, or does it have to be wood? Because if you're gonna get wood for that kind of rail, it's gonna be very expensive, right? Because a lot of it's gonna be hand-done, things like that. But if you can get something that is durable, that meets period aesthetics, is that gonna be okay? And we're gonna need to go to the Eastern Point Historic District in order to do that, and hopefully, they'll be understanding, and if not, then, we'll figure it out.
Right. That's, I was just
Yeah.
looking at how often you're painting compared to how much longer this material would actually last besides going to the Historic Society. Let's see, what else do I have? I mean, just my personal opinion, as far as the things not up to code, I think those would be a priority for me underneath Parks and Rec. You know, if it's not up to code, then we're looking at, you know, injuries and so forth and so on. And then, as far as the internet, I just wanted to know, was that, how was that brought up, or is there requests or complaints that, oh, I'm not able to access internet when I'm at the beach or when I'm at Washington Park?
There has been some of that, you know, why don't we have a Wi-Fi password at the beach, and, you know, and why don't we have it at the park? There was talk from the Economic Development and Planning about, they have benches you can get that actually have outlets and stuff, so people can, charging, you know, so that kind of came out of a whole conversation like that. Would we be able to get those type of benches in the park or at the beach where people could have charging stations to charge their phones if they're, you know.
Like USB?
Yeah.
plugins?
Yep, or, yep, all that stuff. Yep, they, don't ask me how much those benches cost, because I
Yeah, but at the
haven't.
beach?
But, so it came about conversation with that in, you know, regards to, I mean, especially at the beach, even with a VPN, sometimes people have hard time connecting to, you know, they like to read their Kindles or their iPads and stuff down at the beach, and that it's kind of limited because of access to the internet.
That's all the questions I had.
Okay.
Thank you.
Counselor McCabe?
Thank you.
Okay.
Just a
Get
quick
you
question.
sentenced, Lisa.
So, you know, some of the things on this list, if you look at across all of them, some are repairs, and some are, I don't want to say nice to have, but enhancements like the internet or the small business grants, important enhancements for the city. So I think, would it be fair to say that the repairs would come out of capital budgets in the future, probably within the next few years, for some of these items, and then the enhancement kind of stuff is, I'm not quite sure, that would kind of fall in a little bit different kind of bucket that we would have to vote on at some point.
Right. So one of the things that we looked at on the internal committee was, when you look at this from a capital point of view, first of all, everything goes through, is it a need or is it a want? That's the first filter it goes through. And then the second thing is, all right, is in the process of the need, is this something that we want to go ahead and use ARPA money for now, or is this something that the taxpayers are going to have to pay for down the road? And can we use this money in order to use the taxpayer money for something else down the road that may be important or that may come up? So that's one of the things that we looked at. Now, some of the, for example, under Sierra's the economic development, and we'll talk about that later on, but those are things that every year we're probably going to have some of that, right? But the other thing that we looked at here is we did not want to start a program that was funded by these funds, and then we would have a
couldn't
continuation that taxpayers would have to pick it up. That was one of the filters that I put on, because I didn't, you know, we have ARPA money now, but at some point it's going to run out. So that was one of the things.
Yeah, I think it would be nice to have a balance, not just all repairs, but
Right.
some upgrades for the city residents, to balance out a little bit
Yep.
of the enhancements along with the repairs that obviously should be.
So when you finally get everything submitted to you, you're gonna see there's a mixture of human stuff, human projects, human, you know, like social services, economic development, those kind of things. And then there's gonna be capital things as well. So we tried to have a mixture and to, be true to the interim ruling and the final when it first come out. Does that address your,
Yeah, yep,
okay?
thank you.
Counselor Sheffield?
Hi, Mary. First, I guess with the tennis court, because I was the council member that requested the resurfacing of the tennis court. Now, how much did that come to back then? How much did we spend?
That was a $54,000 project.
Okay. Now, in this project, are we looking to strip the court bare and a brand-new surface completely?
Correct.
with the addition of the pickleball, now where would that be located in proximity with the tennis courts?
So it'd be in the same footprint.
Okay,
What they would do is we currently have 6 tennis courts, so 4 would remain as tennis courts and 6 would become pickleball courts, because pickleball, I can't say that word, courts are smaller in diameter.
right,
So whether we put them right at the, where our courts are numbered 1 through 6, whether we put them the first 2 courts, or we put them in the latter 2 courts, or they put them in the middle, that would be a decision we would make. So we'd have 4 tennis courts, and then we'd have 6 pickleball courts.
yeah,
Space of 2 tennis courts.
That's what they said.
now, my concern, I guess, is like, with tennis, you only get to play maybe 6 months out of the year, because the winter months, no one's playing. So, I mean, that's my concern as far as the investment amount, because, it's a great investment, but they're not playing year-round. So, my concern would be how would weather take a toll quickly in terms of, putting that investment and having it last a long time for the investment being put into it.
Well, they are designed to be outside,
Okay.
based on the product that they use to build them. Our courts are actually used March till October. So, the high school, Grasso Tech uses them starting next week.
Yeah.
And they're used, we don't turn the lights off until the 1st of November. So it's only November, December, January, February that they're not used
Right.
here. Depending on weather, we always leave 2 nets up on the courts right now, because if it's a nice day, there could be potentially kids or adults using the tennis courts. So they are used.
Okay.
But-
I know
Yep.
they get used for at least half the year for sure, but my concern is, again, the investment to
Yep.
put into it, that it's
Yeah.
only gonna be used half the year. Is it, worth putting that much money into it if it's,
And we do have the luxury of, they're lit already, and the lights aren't going
Right.
anywhere. So, in pickleball, I think adding that asset to the tennis courts would definitely enhance use. We'd have much more use of people out there playing pickleball. We'd probably have to put some type of schedule together.
yeah,
So,
We did have a line item for just surface restoration on the tennis courts and pickleball courts. And we talked about that internally, and we talked about, because we looked at costs, and we said, okay, fine, if this is a 5-year cost, then every 5 years you're gonna be spending this. And then we started doing the math, and suddenly $997,000 for, actually it was $950, I think initially, but, or $970, whatever it was.
$750 initially.
$750,
Yep.
yeah, that's right. So that looked like a deal, because you're talking about, you're gonna take it all up, we're gonna relay it, we're gonna make sure that the foundation is good and solid and everything else. So we're expecting a good, probably 20 years of life out of this, for this investment. So that's one of the things. If, later on, if council says, that's a lot of money, I'm not sure we wanna spend that, I can have Mary come back and talk about the cost of just refurbishment of the courts. But right now, that was not the recommendation from the committee.
And the last time before, our little work on them in 2016 was 1997, which was 26 years ago, that they were like overhauled. That was a larger project. It was 154,000 26 years ago. Refurbished, we did get a price, if we just wanted refurbished, it was 166,000 and change back in September 2021. When they asked them to get a new price, they felt that just replacing them all would be the better bet for us in regards to financing it.
okay, so 166, if we just wanted to refurbish it,
That
basically,
was the
instead
quote
of,
from September 2021. So when I asked for an updated quote this fall, they only gave me a quote to replace, because they felt there was more damage from in the year and a half since they gave us that quote.
If later on council decides they wanna revisit this, that you wanna revisit it, I'll have Mary go get a bid, go get a quote, and we'll come back to you.
Yep.
But right now, I'm not bringing that to you.
next is the basketball court. We're talking about resurface. Are we gonna strip that completely?
Correct.
Okay, because that court is
Correct.
horrendous. I've played on it myself, so it certainly needs to be stripped clean. What about the baskets themselves? We're going to get new baskets as well, along with the court? 'Cause-
Well, the stanchions and the hoops that are currently there are still in good shape, according, when they were investigated, when they looked at that to get
I
a
beg
quote.
to differ.
Okay, we could
I
have those
think,
looked again. I did find out that one was actually not 10 foot high, one's 9.5, and I'm assuming maybe that was put up that way for the younger kids, so, I don't know, so,
Yes,
but,
I figure if we're going to get a new
Yep.
court, I would like
Okay.
new baskets, glass backboards as well. And
Well, okay,
Glass
now,
since if Sacred Heart could come up with glass backboards, I think.
I'm
we
not sure if
can
I want to
do
put glass outside.
Oh, it's fine. Because Sacred Heart, I
all right,
played on
we
theirs,
will
but
evaluate the backboards.
What happened to the 6 months thing?
6 months, well, basketball, hey, those kids play all year round in basketball, different than
All right.
tennis.
Go ahead, all right, what else? Anything else?
No, I think
Okay,
that's good for now.
Counselor Norris?
I'm gonna go play basketball now that they'll find out the hoops
It's
are
lit.
lower. Yeah. So first of all, I agree with a complete rip out in post-tension concrete, because even with just an overlay for 1 year, a patch, you're lucky if you're gonna get 2 years out of it. So
Yeah.
this is the right way to go. I would recommend that, because I didn't see it in the Hinden breakdown, is a sound barrier. Because if you can see through it, it's not a sound barrier. That's a sight barrier. So that's something you may want to consider, in particular with that neighborhood right there. Hendon,
Sound barrier at the tennis courts?
yeah, on the
Okay,
fence.
got it.
Yeah, Hendon is the best, but they're expensive too, so that's something. The Subersky House, is there a asset management / repair maintenance plan?
Currently, no.
Okay, all right.
We're working on software for that.
We are. So, we are. We're working on software. I want to get we are, before I'm done, we're gonna have a management system here for all assets.
Got it. And then the swing sets. The only place in the city that we have swing sets is at the beach.
No, we have we have one here at the park too. It's quite large. It's
It's huge.
like 18 feet.
Yeah,
It's kind of it's not,
It's
not,
up above Pavilion 5.
Yeah.
It's up there. at the top.
but it's very, the surfacing area is like 20 feet this way and 20 feet that way. It's a very large one. It doesn't have, half the seats are missing.
So we're replacing that also?
I'm replacing
Yeah.
that also.
Okay, all right. And then just because I did make a suggestion about the internet infrastructure at the beach, that was really for a staff administrative use systems. How do we computerize park entrance, cash handling? So that was my thought behind that, not necessarily Wi-Fi for the public. So.
Well,
just
we are going to a
make-
point of sale system because I want to get us out of cash. I'm not a big cash fan.
Right.
So, we're in the process now of running lines and getting that installed. We have the equipment. Mary's doing, beta checks on that now, and run it through its paces. And then, so that's what we're gonna do down at the gatehouse. But if we can also get Wi-Fi down there for people on the beach and Wi-Fi for people in the park, I would like to do that, if we can do that. I think that would help set us apart from other locations. Anything else? Okay, any other questions for Mary? Go ahead, Counselor Carter, say again?
It's just more of a statement in what Councilman Norris said with the barrier. And I know that when the courts were put up, we weren't here, meaning none of us, right? So you made a good point with, there may be a reason why those trees are up there. It may be a barrier thing and the light, like a light source thing with the with the light for the neighbors. You
It
know
may
what I
be.
mean? You know, so
Yeah.
we
So
probably look
before
into
we
that
start
before
cutting
do
trees
anything.
down, we
Yeah.
probably ought to evaluate that. Absolutely. And we want to be good neighbors. Okay? Anything else for Mary? Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
All right, Bill?
Okay, so I have 4 projects that I'd like to brief you on, and they also are in order of importance, criticality. And the first one is the roof replacement on this building. The building roof is original. It was 1964 vintage. It's an old tar and ballast roof. What that is you put down a membrane, you put down your insulation, you spread the tar, you put the stone on top of that, and you go. The life expectancy of that piece was 30 years. After suffering numerous areas that were having leaks, 2015, we pulled back all of the stone, all of the ballast, and we reflooded it with asphalt as well. And that was to remediate alligator cracking, and that's really where all the leaks start to come in. What happens is the stone that's up there protects the asphalt from the UV rays and any elements that hit it, but over time, it still gets it. So we pulled it, we filled it, and that was coming up, so another year or so, that will be 10 years from the time that we made that investment. That investment cost us $270,000, that repair. What I recommend is that we replace the roof. What that would be is we would strip the complete roof right down to the bare structure. So the asphalt goes out, all of the stones, the insulation. We re-insulate it. We put down an EPDM roof, which is rubber. I've worked with the rubber roofing for a number of years. Most of the buildings that I've had have been rubber. The good thing about the rubber is you can maintain it. You get trained to do patches. The life expectancy on a rubber roof is 30 years. And for the rubber itself is typically good for about 50, but what you'll see failures in is the adhesive and on the overlap seams, and you can go in and fix those. So the cost of doing so is $1.2 million. I understand it's a big investment, but I honestly feel this is a perfect opportunity for us to do something like that with the available funds that we have.
And then this is an example of one of the projects that if we don't do it with this money, at some point down the road, we're gonna need to come up with money. And the taxpayers will bear that either through bonding or come out of capital.
Yeah.
So, go ahead, Bill, please continue.
Sure. I'll move on to the next one. The next one is the electrical switchgear distribution downstairs. So that electrical component for the building is truly the heartbeat. So that, so we have an emergency generator coming in, we have utility power that comes in, it goes to a transfer switch, and that basically takes you from utility to a generator. But after that component is the switchgear. So really, that's the heartbeat. So that provides electrical power for outlets, lighting, HVAC, and it also, most importantly, supports the Emergency Operations Center, the Police Department, City Hall, Groton Utilities. Again, that piece is original. It's 1964. I can no longer get components to do repairs on that. It's an old fused switchgear setup. The new setup would be circuit breakers. What we would do is we have a room adjacent to the current room that houses the automatic transfer switch. I would purchase a new switchgear, put it in that room, and then we could switch the loads over one at a time. That would minimize impact to the facility. The cost for that switchgear is $400,000. It's truly, truly critical. I've been in a couple of positions where we've lost those, If I was to lose that, I would probably be without power for the building for at least 3 days. I'd have to bring in temporary gear, mount it, switch the loads over, get a temporary feed going in. So it truly is a critical asset for the building, okay? The third thing that I have for you is the installation or creation of a document storage room. Much of the documents that we have in the building, older stuff, hard paper, for planning and zoning, for building official, for public works, for Groton utilities, is stored down in the basement. It's not temperature controlled. We have some electric heat down there that's mounted to the stanchions, and it kind of disperses across the basement, but it's not uniform. We have no humidity control down there. In the past, we have taken water into the basement from the waterways over here. We believe we remediated that, but there's still some risk with that. I would like to build a new room downstairs that would be temperature controlled, humidity controlled. I'd put down an epoxy floor, LED lighting, also HVAC with humidity, as I mentioned, keyed fire-rated entry doors, and fire-rated walls. The cost for that project is $120,000. Also, we think a good investment. And the last one that I had, I believe Heidi had presented this to you guys maybe 9 months or so ago. And that's for some rain gardens out in front. Three rain gardens. Requested for that would be $25,000. A little bit on that. During our assessment phase, poor drainage and flooding were identified as top hazards, and stormwater infrastructure was also identified as a top vulnerability for the city. City of Groton Public Works Department is actively meeting municipal stormwater 4 requirements, MS4 requirements, and advocating for the installment of rain gardens, rain harvesting, reduction of pollutants in local water bodies. The completion of this project would be a quick win for the city's action plan for that. Just some statistics for that. Completion of the project would result in 11,150 square foot of impervious surface that would be disconnected from the stormwater drainage system that's outside. Approximately 300,000 gallons of water being treated annually through the filtration plant. Site buildings and open space are ADA accessible. Green infrastructure installments complement that. This is also part of the Council of Governments Community Resiliency Plan. And again, that was $25,000. And with that, I'm open for questions, anything that you have.
Okay, council? Deputy Mayor Depot?
Thank you, Mayor. I think all my questions are related to the roof. You said that the roof, we did that repair in 2015. When was the roof originally installed?
1964. That was the original.
And how much longer do you think that the roof will survive the way it is?
So we did that 2015. What we did was we flooded the roof. We added more weight to it. We put more tar up there, hot tar, filled all of the alligator cracks and all the leaks, all the seams. And that's expected to last 10 years, right? So we have a 10-year warranty that's coming up. After that, so I looked at it. I go on the roof frequently just to monitor for leaks, remediation for that. Again, the cost for that was $274,000. If we're looking at another investment like that in another 5 years, I think it best that we truly do it right, strip it down to where we're, bare metal. That price includes a little bit of contingency to resolve that, should we find any rusting. We did do some core samples up there. Came back half decent in regards to the aluminum or the decking up there and the insulation, but honestly, if we can get maybe another 5 years out of that, we'd be lucky. And then we're looking at, do we pull the trigger on another $250,000 repair, or, what will a new roof cost at that time? And that's kind of why I'm really pushing for this, only because I see it to be a wonderful opportunity for us to pay for a burdenous, investment into the facility.
And then, I guess, I don't know who to direct this to, but if we don't use ARPA funds to replace the roof, we most likely would have to bond because it's such a big expense. And financially, I know Ron's not here, but I try to listen when he talks about the things that make sense to bond are the things that last many years like that, right? So it would fall under something that would, like, quote unquote, make sense to bond over other things, which would mean it would affect the taxpayers more than funding it with ARPA funds.
Right. So the rule of thumb is we try not to bond if it's less than $750,000, because the cost for that size bond and the cost for larger bonds is pretty much the same cost for, bond counsel and things like that. When we do try to bond, we try to make sure that we're looking at long-term projects. I'm talking 20-year projects, and that's what this would do, so that future generations are paying their share for this instead of taking it out of, let's say, 1 year and raising taxes, so that this group of people, residents that are here, have to pay for it. So we would probably go with some sort of bonding, and we might go out with a 1.2 mil, or we may combine this with another project to have a larger bonding package, depending on what's out there, but I'm not sure what's out there now.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Did that answer your question?
Yes, it did, thanks.
Anyone else? Counselor Piazza?
I think all of these are really important. The document control room, so do you have a set standard on how long you actually keep documents, or is it lifetime?
I don't know, Mayor, if you know that
Yeah, let
answers,
me,
but
so the state library requires us, right now, the state library requires us to keep documents for X amount of time. Now, let me define X. Sometimes the records are 3 years. In the case of building records and zoning records, some of that goes back for the life of the project. For example, if you're building a building or a house or something like that, you have to have records go all the way back. Right now, the requirement is you have to have paper copy and/or microfiche. We are using scan optics to digitally scan all these and keep them at the same time. 2 years ago, I sent a letter asking for written relief from the requirement. They denied it at that point, but said they would look into it. They've been looking into it, and the state is currently keeping their records electronically. So we've asked, again, I haven't sent a letter, but I will, but we've called them and asked them to reevaluate, and they said something should be coming out soon, but they didn't define what soon was. So right now, we still have this requirement. The challenge we have is that it's open. We do have some file cabinets, but our concern is exposure to the elements of deterioration, exposure in the event of a fire, those kind of things, and that's the purpose of this room, is to protect those documents that we're required to keep.
Right, so the epoxy that you were talking about, so, and the fire doors, but as far as, since you said it's been flooded by the waterways, so doing the epoxy and this control room, we're decreasing the risk of flooding in it, correct?
and I'd also relocate it from the west side of the building over to the east side, where we're much safer. We
Okay,
haven't-
less
we've been
flooding,
problematic
less
over
risk
here.
of-
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
A brand-new area.
And do any of the documents need to be treated per se as now, like, mold, mildew, or anything, or they're all in pretty good shape?
Everything that I've seen is in regards to my
So
material.
sorry.
In regards to Public Works material, seems to be okay, and it's old. And the same thing from what I see for planning and zoning and the building officials. Ron's gear, I haven't taken a look at, we keep that locked up as well, but the intent is to gather all of that material into one safe storage that we can maintain it. We can put down the water bugs, which basically trigger an alarm should they get wet. There's also a sprinkler system in there that we can, that I'll modify a little bit. It's existing, but we'll grow it a little bit. It's just with intent to protect all of this critical material.
Okay. All right, thank
Okay,
you.
Councilor Carter?
Again, nice projects.
Thank you.
The only question I have is with, when you mentioned the roof, and if it needs to be done, it needs to be done. But I would assume though, and, if we did the roof, that would kind of throw out any, possibilities of, in the future, or just in the near future, if we wanted to alter the building or whatnot, as far as building up or whatnot. Like, it's kind of like, all right, how do we build up when we put all this money into the roof, you know? I kind of, you know?
So, yeah, let me address that real quick. When we had our original space study, they came in and talked about how much space the different departments needed. I asked Carlton Smith to give me some numbers for building up and building out. And building up was around $4 million. And we were concerned that we weren't going to be able to meet the structural loading requirements of longitudinal loading. And that was a concern. And also, so the skin was one thing, but then we were gonna have to put reinforcements like through the auditorium in order to support the upper floors, right? And then you also get into the ADA accessibility requirements and things like that, so that was expensive. Because at one point, we thought, well, if we just build up, we can fix our roof problem and our space problem all at the same time. And, right, no, I see where you were going, but then, we decided that that probably wasn't gonna happen, and then when we were looking at building out was about $2.5 million. We were gonna get about half the space, but then, Carlton brought up the proximity to wetlands, because if you look at where we are, this building is surrounded by wetlands. And, you know, it was built in 64, but if we were gonna build this building today, it would not be built here. Because we couldn't meet all the requirements because of the wetland issues, and other issues, but wetland issues.
Yeah, I guess where I was getting at that is that if we did do that, right, I guess we would have to be in an assumption that we're no longer entertaining building up. That was just my question, because it really wouldn't,
Yep,
you know what I mean? In 2 years, only 2 years,
No.
we have a different council possibly, or, you know, whatever.
Understand. Yep. Nope, we're not building up. If we,
Okay, that.
if we build, if the decision is to build, I'm gonna recommend that we build out, either in our open space there or over next to where the park house is. At one time, I think, what year am I in now? 23. So when I was a young counselor 10 or so years ago, there had been a discussion about putting a police building over behind where the park house was. Is that about right, Mary?
Right on the same footprint.
Yep.
Right where the park house was,
Right. So if we go to that, that's,
I know what you're saying. I just didn't know that that was a guarantee that we weren't absolutely building up, and that's what I was, so I.
Understand.
Another thing to consider too, to go up, all of our HVAC equipment's on the roof. Should we decide to go upwards, that would have to be relocated onto the next roof, or it really greatly minimizes the footprint that we could be usable, you know, would be usable for occupancy up there, you know.
Another thing that we have, well, I wasn't gonna talk about this, but let me bring it up. Another thing that we brought up internally in the last month was whether or not we want to go with a sloped roof. Flat roofs are not ideal. But if we decided to go with a sloped roof here, you're talking 3 to 5 times the cost to put this sloped roof up, especially when you're building around the HVAC system and you got to put doors in and access doors and dormers and things like that. So I wanted to bring that up because we did have that internal discussion here. And we had it, Joe Summers weighed in, matter of fact, like last week before he left, with his opinion on cost and those kind of things. Because it was brought up, Ron Uhas, Bill, Joe, and I talked about sloped roofs. Joe Summers?
Yeah.
Oh, you don't know that?
No, just left.
I was just thinking the same thing. I was like,
Joe Summers has resigned. He resigned. I didn't tell you guys that? No. Well, that's terrible. Well, surprise. Surprise, sorry.
Yeah.
Yes. He took a position, with the Mashantuckets, I think. Got a significant raise and lesser responsibility, so he decided to exercise that option. We're in the process, we have a fix, and we have a, job posting out. So my apologies for not telling you that. It wasn't meant to hide anything from the council.
One thing about the rubber too, I made mention, the rubber itself is up to 50 years, expectancy, but then we're able to maintain it. Right now, with the stone and ballast up there, the tar and ballast up there, I truly, it's very difficult to identify where the leaks are coming from, to get the root cause for them. I have to bring in others to make the repairs. With the rubber, I've been very successful through the schools and other properties, so I really like it.
Councilor Norris?
I get the roof, but I gotta ask, so $250,000 was what we did a few years ago. How many times can that be done?
So you add weight, so that's
Yeah.
another thing. So, and you think about it, so again, we reclaimed all the ballast off, all the stones off, and then we flooded it. And maybe you get a half inch or whatever, but you think about that. There's an infinite number, there's not an infinite number of times that you could do that with the roof without identifying, because we've already got deflection up there in some areas. And that kind of is where we have reoccurring problems. And they're, especially right around like the air handling units that are up there, with the weight of them and then the additional tar underneath it, we start to get some deflection, so.
Right. I do get it, but maybe a conversation for another time.
Yeah.
So this would chew up a big chunk of the art money.
Yeah.
So would it be conceivable that it would be a mixture of a bond and this American Rescue money? And to go along with that, is it possible in the future to have some type of finance director just give us a quick rundown of what bonded projects we have right now and what our debt service is, so I can get an idea of if this becomes a bond issue, where are we looking in terms of our debt service in 20 years? So that was one thing. And then the other thing was, the rain gardens, are we allowed to use American Rescue money as a match grant? Because I see here, it says match for grant, and I was just wondering if that's permissible.
I think so, but we can double check.
Yep. So I think the total project cost for that was $35,000, right? We were going to provide a cash match in some kind in hand, so a certain value, I think it was $7,500, maybe up to $10,000, but the rest, utilizing that in that. And truly speaking in that, I think we could do that a little bit, with a little bit less than $25,000, so, yep.
Well, your point is different.
Right.
The point that you're getting is, when you talk about restrictions associated with the use of different types of funds, there are restrictions on that. I will get Ron to check on that and ask that question specifically and get back to you.
Thank you.
I understand the intent of the question.
Right.
Anything else?
No.
Any other counselor? Okay, Bill, thank you.
Thank you all for your time.
Bill?
Okay, moving on. entertain a motion to enter into executive session pursuant to Connecticut General Statute 1-206 Delta upon motion and vote of the city council to discuss the purchase of real estate by the city to include mayor, council, and Ron Gaudet.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. 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 Whoops, you guys said aye. That's good. Sorry. Never mind. I get excited over these things. All right. Any opposed? Opposed, abstention, motion carries. We are in executive session. There will. Okay, the meeting will be ending now. There will be no action coming out of this executive session.